My wife proposed an open relationship to me after meeting my cousin. Now she regrets that day. It's strange how a single summer barbecue can change your life forever. I'd hosted these gatherings at our home in suburban Denver for years, just casual get-togethers with family and friends. My cousin Ryan had recently moved to Colorado for work, so naturally, I invited him to join us. I still remember watching my wife Emma's expression change when she first saw him walking through our backyard gate. Emma and I had been married for 8 years at that point. We met in college, dated for 3 years, and had what I thought was a rock-solid relationship. She worked as a nurse at the local hospital, I was a construction site manager, and we had our comfortable routine. No kids yet, but we were planning to start trying soon. Everything felt stable, predictable even. That day, I noticed how Emma kept finding reasons to join Ryan's conversations. At first, I thought she was just being a good host, making sure my cousin felt welcome in our social circle. But there was something different about the way she laughed at his jokes, how her hand would linger a bit too long when she passed him a drink. I pushed these thoughts aside, telling myself I was being paranoid. 2 weeks after that barbecue, Emma started a conversation that would set everything in motion. She sat me down in our living room, wearing that serious expression I'd come to recognize from whenever she needed to discuss something important. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began. "About us, about life, about different kinds of relationships." My stomach dropped before she even finished her sentence. "What would you think about opening up our marriage?" I knew immediately this wasn't about exploration or growth. This was about Ryan. I didn't explode or storm out when Emma suggested opening our marriage. Instead, I stayed calm and asked questions, learning that my instincts were right. She'd been talking to Ryan almost daily since the barbecue. They'd met for coffee twice, which she'd never mentioned to me. She claimed she felt a connection with him she couldn't ignore, but still loved me and didn't want to destroy our marriage. That night, I slept in our guest room, telling her I needed time to think. In reality, I was already forming a plan. The next morning, I told Emma I'd consider her proposal, but I needed some ground rules first. "We'd take things slow," I said. "No rushing into anything." She agreed eagerly, probably relieved I hadn't immediately filed for divorce. What Emma didn't know was that Ryan and I had always been close, sharing things since we were kids. Despite her sudden interest in him, she didn't really know the kind of person he was. More importantly, she didn't know about our long-standing pact. No matter what, family comes first. I reached out to Ryan that same day, asking to meet at a bar across town where Emma would never run into us. I needed to know exactly what had been going on, and I knew my cousin wouldn't lie to me. What he told me over beers that evening only confirmed what I'd suspected, and gave me all the information I needed for what would come next. The first phase of my plan was simple. I gave Emma exactly what she wanted. I agreed to the open relationship, even pretended to be excited about exploring this new chapter in our marriage. I watched her face light up with barely concealed relief and anticipation. We set up some basic rules. No bringing people to our house, always be honest about who we're seeing, and maintain our regular date nights. She even suggested we keep a shared calendar to be transparent about our schedules, which I agreed to with an understanding smile. Emma wasted no time. Within days, she and Ryan were going out regularly. I'd come home from work to find her getting ready, putting on that black dress I bought her for our last anniversary, or wearing the perfume that used to be reserved for our date nights. She'd kiss me on the cheek before leaving, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Meanwhile, I told her I was using dating apps but wasn't having much luck. She'd pat my hand sympathetically, telling me the right person would come along. The irony of her trying to comfort me about my lack of success in the arrangement she'd pushed for wasn't lost on me. What she didn't know was that I was spending my free time gathering evidence. Text messages, location histories, credit card statements, surveillance footage from the coffee shop where they'd met before she'd ever mentioned opening our marriage. I'd already spoken with a divorce lawyer and had everything ready, but that was just insurance, not the real plan. I also started documenting every time she broke one of our agreed-upon rules about the open relationship, like when she forgot to add a dinner date to our shared calendar, or when she told me she was meeting Ryan at a restaurant but their social media check-ins showed them at a hotel bar instead. The thing about Ryan that Emma hadn't figured out yet was that he had a reputation for getting bored quickly. I knew from our history that his interest rarely lasted more than a few months. He'd done this before, swooped into someone's life like a tornado, caused chaos, and then moved on to his next adventure, leaving others to deal with the aftermath. All I had to do was wait, while appearing to be the understanding, if somewhat unlucky, husband. I even started going to the gym more often, telling Emma it was to make myself more appealing for dating. In reality, I needed something to keep my mind occupied and my anger in check while everything played out. Some nights, when Emma was out with Ryan, I'd sit in our home office looking at old photos from our wedding, from the vacations we'd taken, from all the years before my cousin showed up at that damned barbecue. I'd wonder if she ever looked at those pictures anymore, if she remembered how happy we'd been. But then I'd remind myself that nostalgia wouldn't help me now. I needed to stay focused on the long game. By the second month of our open marriage, the cracks in Emma's perfect new world started showing. Ryan, true to form, was becoming less available. He'd cancel plans last minute, claiming work emergencies or family obligations. I watched Emma's face fall every time her phone buzzed with another excuse from him. She tried to hide her disappointment, but 8 years of marriage had taught me how to read every micro-expression on her face. During this time, something unexpected happened. While I was documenting Ryan and Emma's hotel bar visit one evening, I met Melissa. She was a real estate agent showing a property nearby, and we ended up talking in the hotel's coffee shop. When she noticed my wedding ring, I found myself telling her everything. Maybe it was her professional demeanor or the way she listened without judgment, but something made me trust her. To my surprise, she offered to help. Her own marriage had ended similarly years ago, and she understood my need for closure. Initially, I hesitated. My plan hadn't included actually dating someone else. But Melissa made a compelling case. Having a real person in the picture would make my story more credible than my original plan of fabricating dates. We agreed to keep things strictly platonic, but we'd be seen together at strategic locations. Melissa approached it like staging a house for sale. Everything had to look perfect on the surface. The arrangement worked better than I'd anticipated. I'd mentioned casual details about Melissa to Emma, her real job, her actual hobbies, her genuine personality. I could see it bothered Emma that I was spending time with someone successful and age-appropriate. Unlike Ryan's usual parade of younger women, sometimes Melissa and I would meet at places I knew Emma might drive by. The steakhouse we used to love, the wine bar near her workplace, the coffee shop by her gym. Then came the incident that played perfectly into my hands. Ryan posted pictures on Instagram of himself at a club with another woman. He probably didn't think Emma would see them. She didn't follow his account, but I made sure to leave my laptop open one evening with his profile visible. I heard her sharp intake of breath from across the room when she noticed the photos. That night, she canceled her plans with him, claiming she had a headache. This presented the perfect opportunity. I told Emma I couldn't stay home because I already had plans with Melissa. We went to our usual steakhouse, deliberately choosing a window table. As predicted, I caught a glimpse of Emma's car slowly passing by while Melissa and I were sharing a bottle of wine. Later, Melissa admitted she felt a bit guilty about the deception, but reminded me that sometimes you need to break something completely before you can fix it. When I got home that night, Emma was pretending to be asleep on the couch with the TV on. I could tell by her breathing that she was awake, but I just grabbed a blanket, draped it over her, and went upstairs. For the first time since this all began, I slept soundly in our bed. The next few weeks were a masterclass in passive-aggressive behavior from Emma's side. She'd make pointed comments about loyalty during dinner. She started posting old photos of us together on social media, tagging me in them. When Ryan would text, she'd wait hours to respond. Meanwhile, I made sure she overheard my phone conversations with Melissa, letting her hear genuine laughter and real discussions, knowing it would bother her more than any fabricated relationship could. But the real turning point came when Ryan did exactly what I knew he would. He started seeing someone else without telling Emma. Not the girl from the club photos, but a personal trainer from his gym. Emma found out through a mutual friend, and her carefully constructed world of ethical non-monogamy came crashing down. She came home that night in tears, but I wasn't ready to comfort her yet. This was just the beginning of what I had planned. The fallout with Ryan happened faster than even I had anticipated. After discovering his new relationship, Emma made the mistake of confronting him publicly at his gym. She'd shown up unannounced, expecting to find him with his personal trainer, but instead created a scene that ended with her being asked to leave. Ryan blocked her number that same day. I heard about the incident from 3 different people before Emma finally came home, humiliated and angry. During this time, my relationship with Melissa had evolved in an unexpected way. What started as a strategic alliance had grown into a genuine friendship. She'd become my confidant, offering perspectives I hadn't considered. "You're so focused on making Emma regret her choices," she told me during one of our dinners, "that you might miss the chance to make the right choice for yourself." Her words stuck with me, especially as I watched Emma's life unravel. Emma's behavior became increasingly erratic. She'd alternate between trying to seduce me and giving me the cold shoulder. One day, she'd talk about how opening our marriage was a mistake. The next, she'd be on dating apps, desperately trying to prove she could find someone else too. She started drinking more than usual, getting emotional over old photos, and drunk texting Ryan from different numbers after he blocked her. The breaking point came when she discovered Melissa wasn't just some casual date, that we'd been seeing each other consistently all this time. She found this out through a coworker who'd seen us having lunch together regularly at a cafe near my office. Emma confronted me one night, demanding to know if I was in love with Melissa. The irony of her jealousy wasn't lost on me. Instead of answering, I showed her something I'd been saving, a folder containing every piece of evidence I'd gathered about her relationship with Ryan, including things from before she ever proposed opening our marriage. That night, as Emma sat on our couch crying over the undeniable proof of her own deception, I felt no satisfaction. Melissa's words echoed in my head. I realized that what I'd planned as revenge had actually become my escape route. I moved out the next day, not in a dramatic way. I'd already secured an apartment weeks before, anticipating this moment. While Emma was at work, I packed my essential belongings and left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter next to a USB drive containing copies of all the evidence. I also left a note with my lawyer's contact information. The news about our separation spread quickly through our social circle. Ryan called me immediately. Over beers at our usual spot, I thanked him for playing his part perfectly. "You know I always got your back," he said, clinking his bottle against mine. Some mutual friends chose sides, while others attempted to mediate. Emma's parents, who had always treated me like a son, called repeatedly. I let their calls go to voicemail. My parents supported my decision, especially after I showed them the evidence of Emma's deception. Emma's narrative about our split painted her as the victim. According to her version, I'd emotionally abandoned her and found someone else. She conveniently left out the part about Ryan, about suggesting an open marriage, about her lies. I let her tell her story. The USB drive I'd left behind was insurance enough. If she pushed too far, I could always share the truth. Melissa was surprisingly understanding when I told her I needed space. "You need to finish this chapter before you can start a new one," she said. We agreed to take a step back, though we still met occasionally for coffee. She'd become too important in my life to cut ties completely. What I hadn't expected was Emma's complete breakdown when she finally went through the contents of the USB drive. She showed up at my new apartment one night, mascara streaked down her face, barely able to speak coherently. She hadn't realized I'd known everything from the beginning, that her ethical non-monogamy suggestion had been transparent, that her every move had been documented. The realization that she'd been outplayed at her own game hit her harder than the actual consequences of her actions.